right, guys, we're going to start looking at our next section, which is about Pilgrims and Puritans. So we've talked about Spanish exploration, we've talked about French exploration, we've talked about English exploration and why they were delayed in their exploration. And now we're just going to kind of dive into the English as they start to colonize North America. Okay. So we're going to start out by looking at Pilgrims and Puritans. And a couple things for us to know as we get started. We're looking at the big picture here and some vocabulary. So in this section, you're going to hear me use some terms. Terms like Puritans, separatists, and pilgrims. All right, so what are these terms? Puritans are overly strict Protestants who wanted to simplify the doctrine of the Church of England and purify it of all its Catholic similarities. In other words, they thought the Church of England was too much like the Catholic Church, and they wanted to change that. They wanted to get rid of some of the Catholic traditions that were still present in the Church of England. All right. Some of those Puritans became separatists, and these are radical Puritans who abandoned the attempt to purify the Church of England and opted to create separate churches instead. All right. So Puritans want to purify the Church of England. Separatists want to break away from the Church of England. Okay. Some of those separatists became pilgrims, and that means that they left England to practice their religion as they saw fit in other places. All right. Now, a lot of people think that the pilgrims just left England and came to America, but they went other places first, and we'll look at that as we go. Okay. Let's start with these pilgrims that left England. All right. Some Puritans were called separatists because they broke away from the Anglican Church, and one of those groups of separatists was called the Pilgrims. They fled England and went to Holland first. Okay. Holland is another name that we use for the Netherlands. They stayed there for almost 12 years. But they left because they were unhappy. Why were they unhappy? They were unhappy in Holland because they felt like their children were losing their English heritage. So they left and they came to America aboard the Mayflower in 1620. Okay. On that Mayflower ship in 1620, there's going to be 102 colonists aboard the ship. Now, I say colonists because not all of them were pilgrims. Not all of them were religious people. Some of them were servants, indentured servants. Some of them were what they called commoners. But all of those people that were on the Mayflower that were not part of the pilgrim group were called, I'm having a moment here. They were called strangers. Okay. And some of those strangers didn't agree with the rules that were in place by the pilgrims. All right. So they landed in Plymouth near Massachusetts Bay. They were supposed to land in Virginia near the Hudson River, but they got blown off course and they ended up landing in Plymouth near Massachusetts. Well, those strangers that were on board that didn't want to follow the Puritan rules argued that since they were no longer going to be in Virginia, the charter that they had originally agreed to come to the New World no longer applied, and they didn't have to follow the rules that the Puritans had put in place. So to keep everybody together, they created a document called the Mayflower Compact. All right, this is an agreement that everybody on board had that they would bind together and agree to be governed by the same set of rules. All right. And the reason they needed that was because there was almost a mutiny on board when they did not land where they were supposed to land. All right. Their leader was William Bradford. He became the governor of the Plymouth colony in 1621 after the original governor died quickly. And then a plague struck the colony. Many of them died. Over half of them died. But those that survived thrived. Okay. And they thrived in part due to the help of Squanto, who was a Native American who, surprise, surprise, knew English. You know, that's going to be one of those moments where if you're the Pilgrims and you're highly religious, um, I would argue more religious than anybody is today, and you come to the New World to practice your religion the way that you see fit, and lo and behold, here's this Native American that speaks English. You would take that as a sign from God, and they did. And Squanto showed them how to use their environment to their benefit. He showed them how to plant crops, showed them how you could use the carcasses of dead fish to fertilize your crops, um, things of that nature. Served as a translator between them and other Native Americans. All right. 10 years after the Puritans, or excuse me, 10 years after the Pilgrims came to America, John Winthrop is going to start the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Fun fact, they also came to America aboard the Mayflower, just came 10 years after the original Pilgrims. Now, John Winthrop starts the Massachusetts Bay Colony as a haven for Puritans in the New World. Okay. And over time, thousands of Puritans are going to come to Massachusetts. Winthrop is known for his City on the Hill sermon. All right. The message of the sermon is that these Puritans in Massachusetts are supposed to create a community that will be like a shining example to other people of how God's communities are supposed to be. This sermon is patterned after the Sermon on the Mount, and which is in the book of Matthew in the Bible. But at any rate, they were supposed to be an example of how you're going to have a religious community, almost a theocracy. If you guys don't know what a theocracy is, that's where you don't have a separation of church and state. It's where your religious laws are also your state laws. Okay. And Massachusetts was known for being a very strict religious community. They had laws on the books where if children disobeyed their parents, they could legally be killed. Um, Not that anybody ever did that, but it was there to scare the youth into doing what they were supposed to do. By 1643, almost 20,000 Puritans had come to Massachusetts. And though they left England for Massachusetts because they wanted to practice their religion as they saw fit, they did not extend that courtesy to other people. All right. We're going to find out that they uh, were incredibly intolerant of people whose religious views differed from the majority. Okay, and we have a word for those people. Those people are called heretics. All right, Puritan rule was strict, as we said. Those whose religious beliefs were different were called heretics. And we're going to talk about three heretics. We're going to talk about Roger Williams. He was banished from the Massachusetts community because he questioned the authority of the church. And he established the town of Providence, which had a separation of church and state. Now, that's a radical belief at the time, but it is something that is vital to our democracy today. Okay, I'm going to stop and get on my soapbox for just a second. There has to be a separation of church and state. What does this mean? All right, this means that your government and the laws created by your government cannot dictate to you what religious beliefs you must adhere to, or that you have to adhere to any religious beliefs at all. The reason this is important is if those who are in power have different religious beliefs than you do, then you don't want those who are in power dictating to you how you must believe. Okay? That is central to the American identity, is to have a separation of church and state so that the government can never tell you how to practice your faith. Okay. The other thing that Providence had was religious tolerance, which is something we have in the United States today. Okay. You can be a citizen of the United States no matter what religion you adhere to. Okay. Our next heretic is Anne Hutchinson. Anne Hutchinson was declared a heretic. Get this now. This is definitely, you'll hear me from time to time tell students that you're living in the best time there's ever been to be alive. And you are, historically speaking. There was a time when women could not question the authority of men. And Anne Hutchinson did that. And for that, she paid the price of being excommunicated from the church and banished from Massachusetts. What was this terrible thing that Anne Hutchinson did? Well, she was holding Bible study. Now, there's strike number one. She was criticizing the sermons that were being preached by pastors. That's strike number two. And she was a woman, so that's strike number three. All right. Let's look at the justification that the leadership used to tell Anne Hutchinson that she was a heretic and that she was doing the wrong thing by having Bible study and questioning the word of ordained ministers. Okay, they would cherry pick verses in the Bible like this. Okay, 1 Timothy in the King James Version of the Bible says, "Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection." So automatically, just in verse 11, "Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection." Well, she was having Bible study. She's not exactly being silent when she's leading Bible studies. She's not exactly being silent when she's criticizing the word of ordained ministers. "Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve." So they used this as justification to say that Anne Hutchinson had no business leading a Bible study and had no business questioning the authority of men, and they kicked her out of Massachusetts. And here you see a picture of her excommunication ceremony. Okay. Your last heretic is Thomas Hooker, who just suggested that not only church members should be allowed to vote, that everybody should be allowed to vote. Everybody living within a territory should be allowed to vote. And so he went against church members by saying this, and so they kicked him out of Massachusetts. He's going to go on to found the town of Hartford, where they adopted the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This is the first written constitution in the American colonies. Not that it was ever a constitution of the entire American nation, just that it was the first written constitution of any of the American colonies. All right. So there's Thomas Hooker. All right, this wraps up all the material that you're going to need for your test on Friday. You need to go back and review Chapter 2, Sections 1, 2, and 3, the Spanish exploration and settlements, the French exploration and settlements, the English exploration and settlements, and we'll have a review tomorrow posted, and then your test will be available on Friday. All right, hope you guys are having a great day.